It was sometime around 2013 or 2014. My younger brother was about 7 or 8 years old back then, and we had just moved into a new house so we could be closer to school and save money on rent. Overall, it was a pretty decent place. It even had a small fireplace that made winters feel warm and comfortable. My brother was obsessed with Batman and owned this Batman car toy that would light up and make sounds when you pressed a button. It was easily his favorite thing, and he played with it all the time. One afternoon, he came back inside after playing in the backyard and told us he had found something. Naturally, my mom and I asked him what it was. He showed us a picture of a young boy, the kind you get as a school photo if your parents pay extra. The picture was dirty and worn out, so much so that you could not even tell what year it was taken. We assumed it was nothing serious, probably just a lost photo from some other family. But then my brother said something that immediately caught my attention. He pointed at the picture and said, "That is Buddy?" I gave him a confused look, silently asking him to explain. He repeated himself and said, "This is Buddy. He is my friend." I nodded slowly like I understood, but the truth was, I did not. My brother was not the type to make friends easily, and he did not have any that I knew of. Also, this Buddy only came up after we had moved into the new house. I brushed it off, thinking maybe he had met a kid nearby and got the picture somehow as a keepsake. That same night, around 3 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of my brother talking. Annoyed, I went into his room to tell him to be quiet before he woke our parents. What made it strange was how he was sitting upright in his bed, like he was having a real conversation with someone instead of talking to himself or playing. I told him to go to sleep and then went back to my own room. A couple of days later, my mom asked me if I had noticed my brother getting up during the night. I told her no, but I did mention hearing him talking once. She said he had been acting strange lately. Still, we both dismissed it as normal kid behavior. In my room, my bed faced the door, so if I turned slightly, I could see straight into the hallway. One night, I woke up needing to use the bathroom. I have always been scared of the dark, so I left the hallway light on, knowing my dad would turn it off later. As I lay back in bed facing the door, a sudden noise startled me. It was my brother's Batman car making sounds. I got up, thinking he was awake and playing. But when I walked into his room, he was fast asleep, and the toy was on the floor across the room, still making noise. I walked over and turned it off, then went back to bed. Over the next few days, my brother would not stop talking about Buddy. It started to seriously unsettle me, so I went to check the neighboring houses. One of them had no kids at all, and the other was empty. That made things worse. When I told my dad, he said it was probably just an imaginary friend. I tried to accept that explanation, since I had nothing better. Still, almost every night, someone in the house would hear the Batman toy making noise. My mom, dad's sister, or I would have to go in and turn it off. I mentioned again how I had heard my brother talking to someone. My dad insisted the toy might be motion activated. The thing is, when we bought it, there was no mention of that feature. My sister and I were so uncomfortable that we started sleeping in the same room. I am glad we did, because otherwise I might have convinced myself it was all just a dream. One night, we were talking, trying to keep ourselves calm when we heard that familiar sound again. We both looked toward my open door, which faced directly into my brother's room. What we saw made our stomachs drop. The toy was moving, rolling past the doorway on its own. We screamed and ran straight to our parents' room. They got angry at my brother, thinking he was trying to scare us. But what he said next sent a chill through me. It was not me, but he wanted to play. That night, the toy was thrown in the trash, batteries removed and everything. My sister and I finally felt some relief, but it did not last long. The very next day, my brother somehow had the toy again. Our parents accused him of taking it out of the trash, but he simply said he gave it back to me. That was enough. The toy was smashed into pieces and thrown away for good. My brother was upset, but our parents bought him a new Batman figure, and things seemed to settle down. About a week later, just when we all thought everything was normal again, and Buddy was gone, something else happened. My mom was cooking chicken on the George Foreman grill in the kitchen. She stepped into the living room to ask us something. Suddenly, we heard a loud crash from the kitchen. We rushed in and saw the grill sitting halfway across the room, like it had been thrown. My mom insisted it had not been anywhere near the edge, and my dad had no explanation. After that, nothing else happened. About a year later, we moved out. Even now, I still wonder if my brother's friend Buddy was ever really imaginary. When I was about 10 years old, my family moved into a new house in a different town. I was starting over at a new elementary school as a 5th grader, which is never easy. At first, everything felt uncomfortable. All the other kids already knew each other, and I was just some random new kid showing up. At my school, you had assigned seating during lunch with your class, and I remember how awkward those first few days were. Kids at that age can be very judgmental, and being labeled as the new kid made it harder to fit in and make friends. Despite that rough start, I ended up meeting a few kids who lived on my street. One of them was Dan, who actually went to a private school, so we did not attend the same one. We met when I was riding my bike, and he asked if I had just moved into the corner house. We started hanging out after that. A few days later, I met another kid named Alex. He came to my house, rang the doorbell, and asked my parents if I could come out. I was confused when my parents called me to the door and introduced me to him. He said he lived further down the street and asked if I liked video games. I said yes, and he invited me over to play Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. I did not have that game, but really wanted it, so I agreed. We walked to his house, which was on the opposite corner of the block. Right away, something felt off. The house looked more worn down than the others nearby. It was similar in size, but it did not look cared for. There was no grass in the yard, just 2 large patches of dirt with a walkway leading to the front door. Inside, it was even worse. The place was cluttered everywhere. Boxes and random junk filled nearly every room. He took me down to the basement, which smelled terrible, like a dozen cats had been living there. Strangely, I did not see any pets. The basement was extremely messy, probably the worst part of the house. There was a brown leather couch placed in front of the television. He had both a GameCube and a PS2. He started up San Andreas, and we played the 2-player mode. It was actually fun, and at that moment, I thought maybe I would enjoy being friends with him. After a while, I wanted to head home, so I told him I had to go. He seemed really disappointed, like he wanted me to stay longer. We had already been playing for about 2 hours, so I was ready to leave. He walked with me halfway back until I told him I would see him later. That was my way of saying goodbye. Looking back, that was probably the first sign that something was not quite right about him. At the time, though, I did not think much of it. The next day, Alex came back and rang the doorbell again, asking my parents if I could come out. This time, we played GameCube in my room for about an hour. I do not mean to sound harsh, but I started to feel uncomfortable around him. Something about him seemed off, and he would get too physically close, which made me uneasy. The next day after school, he came by again. I was not in the mood, so I told my mom to tell him I was not feeling well. She did, and he left. Honestly, I preferred hanging out with Dan because I felt more comfortable around him. Later that same day, I rode my bike to Dan's house to see if he wanted to hang out. He agreed, and we started riding our bikes further down the street. That turned out to be a mistake. As we passed Alex's house, he came outside as if he had been watching through the window. It felt strange, especially since I had just told him I was sick earlier. As we rode past, I told Dan that I had hung out with Alex but thought he seemed a bit weird. Dan looked surprised and told me that the whole family had a reputation for being strange. That was also when I found out Alex was actually 12, a couple of years older than me. After that, I decided to avoid him. The following weekend, he came to my house again asking for me. I had already told my mom to say I was not home if he came back. So she did. But later that night, something happened that really scared me. I woke up to my window wide open, and a cold breeze was coming into the room. It was a chilly September night, and I knew I had left the window closed. As I tried to process what was happening, I suddenly felt something poke my foot. I screamed. I looked toward the end of my bed and saw Alex standing there. He told me to be quiet and said it was just him. Before I could even ask what he was doing, he said his parents were arguing and that he wanted to sleep in my room. He had climbed through my window. I was completely shocked. I told him to get out. He begged me to let him stay, but I kept telling him to leave. Eventually, he turned around and climbed back out of the window. It was a disturbing moment. I immediately shut the window, locked it, and went to wake up my parents. They were shocked. The next day, they went to speak with his parents. When they returned, they said it did not go well. Apparently, his mother reacted by yelling and laughing, taking no responsibility at all. My parents chose not to involve the police, likely because Alex was still a kid. A few nights later, I woke up to knocking at my window. The blinds were closed, but I knew it had to be him. I did not respond. The knocking continued for several minutes, and I even heard someone trying to open the window. I was terrified, my heart racing the entire time. Eventually, it stopped. I told my parents, and they advised me to ignore it. I think they did not feel as threatened since it was another child. A few days after that, Dan and another friend from school and I were riding our bikes down the street. As we passed Alex's house, I saw him rush to the window and just stare at us. I told my friends everything that had happened. They found it both funny and disturbing. One of them even commented that it matched the kind of house he lived in. Then came the final incident. One night, I woke up to a loud noise in my room. It was the sound of my window shattering. I screamed as I saw Alex climbing inside through the broken glass and blinds. I ran straight to my parents' room to wake them up. By the time we reacted, he had already run off. My dad chased him all the way back to his house, but Alex made it inside before he could catch him. My dad banged on the door until his parents answered. Whatever he said must have worked, because he convinced them to pay for the damage instead of involving the police. They covered the cost of the broken window, and after that, I never had any direct interaction with Alex again. I would occasionally see him outside his house over the next couple of years while passing by in the car. Eventually, that family moved away, which was a huge relief. Looking back, I still wonder what his intentions were. Breaking my window and climbing inside could not have led to anything good. I sometimes think about what kind of person Alex might have grown up to be, and honestly, it is not a comforting thought. This happened when I was pretty young, around 8 years old. My parents had me later in life, and my 2 older siblings are both at least 10 years older than me. One night, I woke up suddenly to noise coming from downstairs. It was my parents. I cracked my bedroom door open and could hear them panicking about something. I did not know what was going on. I walked over to the top of the stairs and called down. My mom came to the bottom and told me to go back to bed. I listened without asking anything. Still, I could tell they were really stressed. I tried to fall asleep again, but then I heard the front door slam shut and everything went completely quiet. I figured they had left the house, though I had no idea why. Since my mom told me to go back to sleep, I did. At some point later, I woke up again to more sounds downstairs. I heard the front door close, followed by footsteps, but no voices. I assumed they had come back and were just trying not to wake me. I could hear movement around the house, footsteps and small thumps. I heard drawers and cabinets opening and shutting. I am pretty sure I even heard the fridge open. I thought it was my older brother Chris. He was 10 years older than me and already had a car, so he would go out late and come home at odd hours. Him coming back around 2 in the morning and going through the fridge was completely normal. I kept telling myself all of these things, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Eventually, I heard footsteps on the stairs, getting louder as they came up until they reached the top and came straight to my door. My door slowly opened. I did not sit up or move. I just lay there with my eyes open, facing the doorway. There were no lights on outside my room. Whoever it was had been moving around in total darkness. All I could see was a dark shape in the doorway, like the outline of a head. I started saying names: Chris, Mom, Dad. Then I asked, "Who is there?" There was no answer. The door slowly closed again, leaving me confused and a little uneasy. I heard footsteps going back down the stairs. Now I convinced myself it must have been my dad checking on me after getting home, even though I did not understand why he would ignore me. After that, everything went quiet again. My curiosity got the better of me, so I got out of bed and walked downstairs in the dark. I kept all the lights off as I moved toward the kitchen. When I reached the doorway, I froze. There was a tall figure standing in the middle of the kitchen. I said Dad, assuming it was him based on the height. A deep voice responded, "Go back upstairs." I ran up the stairs as fast as I could, went into my room, shut the door, and jumped under the covers. The only thing running through my mind was why my dad sounded like that. At that age, it did not even cross my mind that it could be a stranger. Not until later, when I heard the front door open again and more noise downstairs. This time, I heard my parents' voices. I went back to the top of the stairs, and they were surprised to see me awake. I asked them what had happened. They told me Chris had been in an accident, but that he was going to be okay. Months later, I learned he had crashed his car while driving in a condition he should not have been driving in. My parents had gotten a call from the hospital and rushed out immediately, leaving me asleep. I asked my dad if he had come into my room earlier, and that is when I found out they had been gone for hours. My mom started panicking and yelling at my dad because he had forgotten to lock the door when they left. When I told them about the person at my door and in the kitchen, my dad grabbed his gun and searched the house while my mom called the police. The last thing I remember is a police officer asking me to explain everything that happened. My parents later said they felt embarrassed, having to admit they left me home alone with the door unlocked. Nothing seemed to be missing, even though someone had clearly been inside the house. Whoever it was did not try to hurt me. Having a stranger in your home is terrifying on its own. Going through something like that when you are 8 years old makes it even worse.